This is Zestology, new rules for living with energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton, walking around central London, and today's podcast is all about being 30% more attractive. Sound interesting? I thought it would. Weirdly enough, part of this podcast, quite a large part of this podcast, is actually about grief and dealing with grief. But it's not quite so sexy in the title, is it? But there is a link between dealing with grief and being 30% more attractive. So bear with me. Donna Lancaster is remarkably happy for someone who has to deal with a lot of people processing grief. And it's incredible how everything in your life starts to get better if you can process the bad stuff in your life effectively and kind of sit with it and deal with it and move on from it. She's a senior and well-known life and relationship coach who specialises in the area of grief. She used to be head of training for the Hoffman process, which you've probably heard about at some point in the past. It's a very famous set of retreats that you can go on to sort your life out. She now runs her own The Bridge Retreat, which is a personal development experience here in the UK. And on this podcast, we talk about how you can get 30% more attractive. And it comes up so many times that in the end, we just decide to call this podcast 30% More Attractive? ? So here she is talking about grief, happiness, and everything in between. Oh, and attractiveness. It is Donna Lancaster on Zestology. I've not done a podcast on grief before. So I'll be looking forward to this.
Exciting.
Especially as I've done a lot of my own work on grief in the last couple of years. You know, going back and realising that maybe at the time I could have dealt with some things in my childhood even better, like my dad dying, for example, even better than I did. I think it's quite an interesting topic that, especially us Brits, we're not very good at talking about anything really, are we? Are we not very good at dealing with loss and grief?
No, we're not. And that's nobody's fault. It's just like, you know, if you think about our parents' generations and the generations before us, it's like, it just wasn't the done thing, generally speaking, to talk about what hurts. And certainly not to feel your feelings around what hurts. It was kind of, you know, the British stiff upper lip, get on with it, you know. And so the messages that we've received and that get passed down through the generations is just, as I say, crack on, you know. It's like crack on. Yeah. It's like get on with it. And many of us are also, especially British people, I think we're really good at getting on with it. But what happens, and what I see, Tony, is that more and more the light in people's eyes go out, and then their connection to their joyful, playful, creative side dies as part of suppressing grief, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Because I think it's quite interesting doing a podcast on grief. People will think, well, I haven't lost anyone in the last 3 or 6 months, so that's not relevant to me. I wonder how relevant it is when you work with people who actually lost someone or something important a long time ago, but just haven't processed it right. I heard you mention something along the lines of physical pain that is expressed as a result of a kind of emotional trauma that hasn't been properly processed. I can't remember what you called it. It was other body manifestations.
Yeah, did I say that? Sounds very grand.
Yeah, very, very impressive words.
Oh, really? I thought you sold it for someone.
Other body manifestations.
Yeah, wow, I can't believe that came out of my mouth. Must have been a book I read. But it is so true that when you know, I've worked with people for 28 years, I think it is coming up now, and, you know, in families, one-to-ones, in couples therapy, all sorts, and in all different sort of situations, and you see, like I said, that you see the physical themes in people's lives, like the things that, you know, migraines, the IBS, obviously depression, anxiety. We get lots of people with lower back pain and all sorts of physical ailments, even things like pains in their knees, all of these kind of things that they don't necessarily associate with loss, unprocessed loss, and then they they come, and they start doing some work like on the bridge or whatever it might be, and they say, and they, at the beginning they're really adamant, they go, yes, but I have got a back condition, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure you have, but I wonder how much of that is related to your body literally locked in trauma without you realising it, from the moment when, say, a parent died and it wasn't then talked about, or you weren't allowed to mourn the loss of that parent properly, and your whole body just, it's like it's a trauma response.
It's quite difficult for kind of relatively sane, left-brained, logical, cognitive people to get their head around that energies in a physical part of the body can arise as something way back. They might be outwardly very happy. Life is going okay. And yet they can't explain this back pain. Even I find it, and I'm kind of on board with what you're saying, but I find it hard to tune into that.
And I get it, but the thing for me is that, you can, I'm sure there's plenty of research that backs it up and plenty of research that challenges it, but I'm more of an experiential person, and over 28 years, themes do not lie, and just working with thousands of people in those 28 years and seeing the same themes and people's physical manifestations of pain getting better. If I look at my own life, Tony, I've spoken about this a lot, of having 20 years being labelled depressed, and actually only when I started to process my own grief through my body, not through my left brain, and not just through talking therapies, which served me well, but I needed to go into the body, only then did I stop feeling depressed. I didn't have depression. It was labelled and diagnosed as depression. It was unprocessed grief.
Right.
100%.
And I definitely know, I've talked about tapping quite a bit on this podcast before. I went and saw an emotional freedom therapist a while back, and that was really kind of the catalyst almost to starting this podcast. And talk about energy and releasing energy. I would go in, and I was physically in quite a lot of pain at that time. That's really bad. I remember one time, really bad stomach ache with like loads of gurgle. I just couldn't work out what it was. An hour later, I was virtually skipping through the park on my way back to the tube station. And I really can't, and I've sent quite a few other people Ashley's way, and the same kind of things happen. Physical symptoms clear up.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, of course, I have a healthy sort of curious mind and a skepticism about some of these things as well. But experience doesn't lie in terms of years and years of seeing the same themes and people getting better, physically better.
I saw a quote which said that, it's better to be curious than kind of be judgmental. So I like to try and be curious, but I am sometimes a little bit kind of sceptical when I hear about how it's I think you described your approach as being kind of heart-based. I'm like, but what about working it all out in the mind?
Both, by the way.
Oh, really? Okay, because I kind of like, as I said, left-brained already, I like to work things out logically. And I think some people would say, well, what do you mean heart-based? So what do you mean heart-based?
It's funny because I always say to people that I used to be what's called a neck-up living type. So it was all, my body sort of carried me around, but really I did life from the neck up.
Oh dear, I think that's me.
And it was, and I read all the books and I did it, and it was like I functioned, even in intimate relationships, really, from the neck up, and I was always questioning and arguing and challenging, and it was like that was part of my problem, because we don't just we have a wonderful mind and it serves us really well, but that's not all there is, and we know this, and so it was really when I talk about heart-based work, we work with the cognitive as well, because if you're not able to join the dots, and if you're not able to make connections on a cognitive level, you're less likely to want to do some of the body-based stuff, because you need the mind wants to go, that's why we're doing this weird stuff.
Right.
Weird in inverted commas.
Yeah.
But what we mean by on the bridge in terms of heart-based work is really dropping from joining the dots, using the mind to understand why we might behave in certain ways, as an example, and then really using the body to drop into the heart and process the emotions related to what happened to us. It's as simple as that. So that's what we mean by heart-based work. It's helping people live more holistically rather than just neck up, helping them access their heart.
And in terms of grief, Perhaps you could give an example. I mean, I know there's probably a lot of people thinking, yeah, I could do with some work in this area. What's an example of something that you might have done with a client who's come to the bridge, for example, or a success story or something like that?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I mean, the first thing I want to say is that we work with grief as part of the human condition, so it's not just bereavement. Grief actually means natural reaction to any kind of loss. So it's really, we're working, like I said to you before, we're working with people who have experienced bereavement, who have divorce or an end of a significant relationship.
Divorce, I mean, that's a loss, isn't it?
Massive. And then there's things like missed parenthood, missed opportunities, a loss of self, loss of health. We all experience loss. It's part of being human, and we help people to grieve whatever losses it is that they need to work with. Sorry, that didn't answer your question. What was the?
Well, it's a good pretext to answer the question.
Just as you said about an example.
The question was, so people are thinking, okay, yeah, there's a loss there. What happens?
Yeah, in terms of how we might work.
Yeah, how might you work with it, and I guess. Following on from that, I wonder if we can look at some stuff that people can do straight away, as opposed to coming on the retreat. So that's a kind of first step. Sure.
So what we do with people, it's so hard to kind of describe the work that we do, Tony, because it's so layered. So a big part of the bridge is about working with people in, as we say in community, in group. And there's a great saying by this amazing woman called Sobonfu Some, I believe, that she says, we are wounded in community, so we must heal in community. And it's basically saying, you are wounded in your family, at school, in society, whether it be at church or whatever it was true for some people, that's in a group. And so a really powerful way of healing your pains is in a group. So that's a big part of the work that we do, is working. So, for example, if I was working with you, you would have my one-to-one attention, but in front of other people.
Right.
So that you can feel what it feels like to be really seen, heard and understood, which is what we all needed as a child and we need as adults, is to be seen, heard and understood. So we work, we support people in terms of processing their grief in group, and also giving them that one-to-one connection. And then we use a lot of body-based practices. Once we've helped people join the dots, my mum was like this, my dad was like that, and therefore I behave like this. Some people, they have lots of people that come on the bridge, for example, they've made those connections and other people haven't. So we have to take people through to make sure they, there's sort of aha moments. Yeah. And then it's, what do we do with that knowledge? If you just keep it in a neck up situation, it's just awareness. That's all it is. It's like, I understand why I'm a complete disaster in relationships. That's interesting. But it doesn't change anything, Tony. Do you know what I mean? And that's where the body comes in. So what we do on the bridge is we support people through a number of different body-based experiences to basically allow their pain, their grief to come up. And we do that. Sometimes they will be writing, which also helps.
Yes, there's a kinesthetic element to that, isn't there?
Yeah. And then we do something called shaking, which is based on somatic experiencing. I don't know if you know the work of Dr. Peter Levine. It's in essence, and I don't want to do a disservice to his work, but in essence what we're doing is mimicking animals. Because animals don't, unless they're trapped in a confined space, they don't generally suffer from trauma in the way humans do, because they shake their body after a traumatic experience. They literally shake. If a deer gets caught by a lion and it escapes, it will play dead, and then as soon as it gets away, if it gets away, it will just shake its whole body, lay on the floor, and then it gets up and off, it's eating grass again. And this is what we do, is we work with people. It sounds crazy, but it
sounds
really,
awesome.
It's amazing, and there was a quote actually that I posted on our social media recently with one of our participants, when she said, I felt self-conscious at first, shaking, as most people would. It's like, what is this?
I would hate it.
No, very British.
Very self-conscious.
Yeah, exactly. And so she said, I felt self-conscious, then I went for it, and the self-consciousness disappeared, and so did my anxiety. And it's like, this is the power of the body. It's all in the body.
Interesting that we were talking about tapping just a few moments ago, and that is very much, there's a bit of cognitive stuff, there's a bit of head stuff, and then you're bringing it into the physical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It struck me when I was kind of looking into what you do before we met, that this might be quite a modern affliction, in that a lot of what you do seems to be quite primal, and what you were just talking about certainly seems to be very primal. I wonder if it's a modern phenomenon that we are more affected by grief than ever before, because we've got so far away from the kind of essential kind of animalistic condition of our ancestors. Is that, and when you talk about community as well, presumably in the past we'd all be living in a big commune, and we'd sit around the fire and we would probably talk more and associate more with our experiences.
Yes.
Do you think that's relevant?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I think that more and more people are feeling more and more, it's that individualistic society. It's like more and more separate from, and again, that's part of what we work on as well, is reconnecting people not just to each other but to nature. If you live in a city and you don't, now it might sound hippie, but it's like if you don't get your feet on the grass, it's like we are part of nature. And so if you don't have that connection to the earth, if you don't have experiences even walking through the park, it really affects your well-being. Yeah. It's as simple as, and I do agree. I think that people have lost that. I read somewhere recently, and it was like this woman, Sobonfu Some, who influenced quite a lot of my work, and she's a West African tribal leader, and in her tribes, the time that when we go to, say, happy hour, we go for drinks after work, that's when the tribes came together around the fire with the kids, and people would sit down like you and I, and you'd say, how's your day? And we'd just go, oh, this happened and that happened. And it's really just not letting stuff build up, which is, again, what causes all these physical ailments, is that people weren't letting these things build up. We were just processing them as and when. And we've lost that, I think. It's like you have to get, 3 sheets of the wind before you kind of go, my marriage isn't working.
So connection, community, connection to nature,
to body.
Did you notice my shoes, by the way?
Oh,
I've got some of these barefoot shoes.
Oh, very nice.
Well, they're not particularly stylish, but the soles the soles are 3 millimeters thick. Okay. So what you were just talking about in terms of walking on the park and feeling the grass, is, well, you don't quite feel the grass, but you feel every lump and bump on the pavement.
Right.
And it's quite nice.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, yeah. But do they? I mean, there's theories around. I don't know if you've read anything around grounding and the work of the guy, I can't remember his name, Clifford something.
I have read some stuff on grounding. Yeah. I don't think these are grounded, although I do have some grounded flip-flops.
Look, you're not so left brain after all.
Yeah. Well, but it can't. I know I am too left brain. Oh, yeah. Definitely. I need to get out of my head a bit more, especially as I think, I mean, I think it's interesting with men in particular. That's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Men, I think, probably a lot of us acknowledge that men in this country, and maybe in many countries, aren't as good at acknowledging and talking about that and connecting with their emotions as women. And it did strike me when I was kind of reading, I listened to another podcast that you did, that I wondered if it was quite a feminine approach, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk to you about masculinity and how men dealing with grief. Yeah, it's a really good point, because one of my own griefs, I guess, is the lack of men doing certainly the bridge. I'm sure there's lots of men's work. Well, I know there's lots of amazing men's work going on where they're supporting men to really access and release their grief. But and also, of course, there is, we are a team of females. Actually, we're looking for male facilitators, but it's less and less men working. The right kind. We haven't found the right kind of male facilitator, and we're also wondering about what that would bring to the work, to bring in the masculine in that way. Although we all hold masculine and feminine energy, so it's like, we do some of the exercises that we do. You would say they've got a lot of masculine energy. So, for example, when we work with anger. This is something that men perhaps have a more easier access to, certainly in my experience, because it's one of the few kind of powerful emotions that men can
can release and access is to be angry, you know. It's not judged in the way as if you think about all the messages that men get and boys get around sadness and fear. It's very much, you know, big boys don't cry kind of thing. So yeah, some of the work that we do, even though we are a female team, and it definitely has a lot of feminine nurturing energy in the work that we do, it does have, there's elements of masculine threaded through it.
Yeah, and that what you say about everyone having masculine and feminine traits, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about the England football team when you were talking. We're recording this during the World Cup. By the time it goes out, who knows? They might have won it or they might not have.
Yeah.
But the psychologist with the men's team has had a load of press over the past few days. Female psychologist who they all absolutely adore, clearly, has managed to kind of maintain some distance from the team but still get on with them really well and help this very kind of shy and charming group of young millennials kind of open up to each other about kind of quite deep experiences by the sound of things. I mean, it sounds like she's had them doing some stuff which is kind of based around connecting with trauma but also having loads of fun. And isn't it nice to see someone working with footballers like that and footballers being such role models as well?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's so inspiring and really touches me. I'm not a great football fan, but I know...
You'll be watching the game tonight, though, won't you?
Do you know what? I'm actually running an information evening about the bridge.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and all women are coming. No surprises. No surprises there.
Oh, goodness. If I came, I'd have to be watching on my phone.
I know, quite right. No, I did think about cancelling, but no, the women are still coming, so we'll
cool.
do it.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So not everyone... I believe 30 million people will be watching the game tonight, but it's not 50 million. There'll still be some people coming to yours.
Yeah,
that's great.
Exactly. No, there's a guy, is it Danny Rose, or did I make that up?
Danny Rose, yeah.
Is he a footballer?
Yeah. England player, well done.
But he recently spoke out openly about his depression and about how he'd really struggled. And it was those kind of, you know, really sticking their neck above the parapet in that sense. It's like so inspiring, and it gives permission to other men to do the same. And I think it's amazing. And it's the same when we get people come to do the work that we do, and we get a lot of kind of corporate, left-brainy, you know, highly successful, high achievers, and they feel like, you know, yeah, I've ticked all the boxes, I've made a lot of money, I've got the car, the house, the wife, the kids, the family, the life that I thought that I should achieve and aspire to have, and I feel empty inside. And people come to us and they're like, I need help. I can't even enjoy anything that I've got, and it's because they're living from the neck up. And if you don't go into the body, and if you don't access the blocked emotions that we all have, generally, it can suppress your ability to enjoy your life. It does.
So if someone's listening to that and thinking, oh dear, that might be me, what are some things that they might start to do straight away? And obviously we will definitely give out the details for the bridge as well, and your introduction evenings, but I wonder if there's stuff we can all do.
Totally. I mean, I think we all need to be able to have a trusted other, whether that's a friend, a therapist, a partner, and obviously you have to not burden loved ones with too much of your stuff, if you like. It's not like otherwise your partner becomes your therapist, but definitely a trusted other or others that you can actually really talk honestly to, Tony. It's those, I always call it saying the unsayable, when you say to somebody, you know, the darkest thoughts, the scariest thoughts, you know. So when people can say to a trusted other, for example, I felt like killing myself at times, that's something. If you're not able to express that, if you have that thought, it's just an example, it's like it gets trapped inside you. Those words are trapped inside you, and the heaviness of what they mean, it's like it's trapped inside you. And so to be able to just say to somebody that you trust, not just, you know, random person on the tube, but somebody you really trust that is not going to betray your trust. Like sometimes I feel like ending it all, or even I remember Michael Neal, who's a great guy.
NLP guy.
Yeah, and he also does a lot around the 3 principles. But anyway,
I've done some training with Mike.
Oh, really? And I love his stuff. And he said that he actually spoke to his wife about his desire once to kill himself, and she said, "Oh yeah, you mean the suicide thought?" She said, "I have a similar thing, and it's called the wanting a divorce thought." And it was just, and it was funny, but it was also like, really, it's okay to have those thoughts. And I think that's the thing that people get scared about. Authentic connections. They get, more and more in London, you're seeing these kind of mixed circles where people come together and they say the unsayable.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where people sit down and go, yeah, I woke up this morning, I felt like killing myself. Or I woke up this morning, it's not all just the heavy stuff, it's also I woke up this morning and I realised I need to leave my job and find a new retrain in a new career, or I woke up this morning and wanted to access my creativity. It doesn't have to be just the kind of darkest things, but I do think we need to be able to say the unsayable and not be punished for it, because a lot of us are scared that if we were that honest with people we love, for example, that's the great benefit of a coach or a therapist, is you can say to people pretty much anything and know that it won't go anywhere, and it's all right, because again, it's part of being human, isn't it? That sometimes we have horrible thoughts, judgmental thoughts, or like Michael Neal says, the suicide thought, or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to talk about this stuff. Obviously, my day job is I'm a presenter on Sky Sports, and most of the people who watch that are kind of young men, and I think it is nice to be able to say, look, I love football, but I also think it's important every once in a while to really connect with these inner thoughts and emotions. And also, from a personal perspective, there's some stuff that's in your head that causes you quite a lot of shame.
Yes.
But once you've told someone else about it, it seems to go away a bit.
Exactly. And that is the thing of we're in this together. It's like when I first started talking about my depression, it was literally, I said it to somebody, I can't remember where, and it was like, me too, oh yeah, oh God, oh really, oh, and it's like when that starts to happen, that's when the shame can really start to dissipate, is that when we say, mental health is not a dirty word or dirty words, we all have it, and we've all had, most people have had challenges with their mental health at some point. So I think it's even more for men, Tony. That's the thing that I really feel passionately about, is about getting more men to do this work. And whether it's the bridge or whether it's men's work, I really don't care. I just think to get, because the suicide rates for young men and all of that stuff, it's like, a lot of men are checking out of life because they feel so disillusioned, and a lot of that is the not being able to say the unsayable.
I wonder I don't know if it's just the fact that I'm getting older and a different generation to the kind of 18-year-old party generation, but I feel like the kind of connections that I have with my mates, it's mostly just taking the mickey out of each other. But every once in a while, it kind of transcends that, and normally in smaller groups, it will veer from the ridiculous chat about football or whatever it might be to suddenly connecting about death or something really important, something that's really been going on for a long time. I seem to have those connections a little bit more. I've always been quite interested. I interviewed John Gray, the author of Men Are From Mars, and he's really big into his men's groups. And it's not something that I've ever done. It just seems like almost just a bit of a step too far from kind of let's just go to the pub and watch football to, okay guys, let's have a men's group. But
in that accent, in that voice,
but the rules that John Gray talks about are, look, we actually prioritise talking about the important stuff for a couple of hours, and then we go and watch sport in the pub. So I think it would work. It's probably just taking that step.
Absolutely, and it's that thing, is they're not mutually exclusive. Do you know what I mean? You can have those deeper conversations and still talk about football. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And it's in fact, the more you have those authentic connections with men, the more joy you have in your life, and the more big laughs, and the more you can really enjoy, whether it's football or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, and this is why there's some great men's work out there that, and it comes back to what you were saying earlier about the kind of primal stuff. There's a piece of work called the Mankind Project, and And they really take men back to the kind of, and really allowing them to access their rage, and really then allowing them to, because once you kind of access that rage and express it, what often happens is the sadness and the fears follow. The softer emotions are sort of ride on the back of that, you know? And things like the Mankind Project, they're really taking men out in nature. It's very kind of like, and men having those conversations.
With the anger as well. I mean, that is very physical, isn't it? Normally, when you're really angry, there's I bit my lip when I was eating a bit of chocolate at the weekend, and I let out this absolute roar, and my girlfriend thought I'd swallowed my tongue or something, but I was just livid that I'd bitten into my lip. But it was such a physical reaction. And I guess sometimes when you're seething about something and it's kind of in your head, just an expression of anger can help to start to access those other emotions as well. Just let's connect with it, I guess.
Totally. That's why a lot of time when the work that I do is people, we support them to access their anger, and then literally they will often cry afterwards. So they get to that place and they're like, and they have this big burst of this primal release, and then underneath, then they start really, really accessing the sadness and really sobbing. So it's like, and anger, healthy anger gets such bad press because we, Gabby, my co-founder on the bridge, she always calls it life force. She says she doesn't even like the word anger. She's like, it's life force. It's how you use it that matters. And anger and passion they're like close, cousins or bedfellows. They're very similar, and if you can really healthily express anger, you can really fully express your passion.
So we shouldn't feel bad about getting angry,
as long as you don't hurt anyone, of course. And it's like finding ways to safely express anger, really to do it safely, and that's what we do. And that, coming back to your question about other ways people can sort of support themselves to access their emotions, not just talking, but then again through the body. So it is, whether or not you can do something physical like kickboxing or something where you, and lots of people do already, whether they realise it or not, where they actually are releasing some of this backlog of anger that sits in the system, so that they can actually so it doesn't leak out into their life. Because that's the other thing, Tony, is like, there's this great saying which says, if you don't share your story, you'll show your story. And how you will show you, so if you don't talk about what's going on for you, how you will show it is how you behave to other people, to how you treat your body, how you function in the world. Because anger, if it's not let out, say on a punch bag, it will leak out of you sideways. That's why there's the road rage and the maybe even explosions that are bit lit. But do you know what I mean? It's like, it's when it's disproportionate to the event. That if you're furious that somebody nipped in front of you in the queue in Tesco's, and you're this real, like, I want to really pull this person out of the way or hurt this person, it's a clue that it isn't about the person pushing in front of you in Tesco's, that there may be a whole backlog of expressed anger that you need to get out of your system.
There's also something adrenal potentially going on there, isn't there? You're just like so overstimulated, over agitated. Exactly.
And that's, again, comes back to the things that people can do for themselves is get in nature as much, especially if you're a city dweller. You find ways to be more in nature, and it's not,
wear some special shoes.
Yeah, wear special shoes. And it's not hippy dippy nonsense. It really, it's basic stuff that when people even go without their gadgets, and that's what we do, is we're a digital detox on the bridge. And the first day, people are almost...
do you?
Yeah.
It's all handed in?
It's all handed in.
Oh, brilliant.
And Tony, the first day, people, myself included when I did this work, it's like people almost have to be wrestled to the ground to give their phone away. And the first couple of days, they've got phantom phone issues where they're like reaching.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they feel the benefits. And then at the end of the week, we could flog all those gadgets because people don't want them back.
I bet.
They just don't want their gadgets back.
That is fantastic.
So really, to find ways to detox from gadgets, digital detox, even if you did it on like a Sunday, you would feel the benefits in your sleep that night. You really would.
I've put a course together with a friend of mine who's been on the podcast a few times, actually, called Unplug, and it is all about beating tech distraction.
Yeah.
Problem is, it's so addictive. Just interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you that it is brought to you by Dr. Stephen Simpson and I's course, iwanttounplug.com. If you'd like to access deeper states of focus, productivity and creativity, then you head to iwanttounplug.com. That's iwanttounplug.com, and start to use the skills of neuro-linguistic programming to unplug effectively and feel that focus, productivity and creativity. So if you fancy learning a little bit more about NLP, taking the course, using some relaxation challenges and meditations in there as well, then you can head to iwanttounplug.com, and remember, use the code ZESTOLOGY for 30% off. That is it. Back to the show. I heard you mention the ripple effect, and that is once you start taking small actions like this, or slightly bigger actions like going to the bridge retreat, other things happen. And I think you were talking about it in relation of kind of firstly for the self and then the community and then on a global level. What exactly do you mean by the ripple effect?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of my, I always call it a secret mission, but it's not that secret because I'm talking about it. But it's kind of
not so secret mission.
No, exactly, my not so secret mission is I describe the work that I do and as inner activism. And so I really believe that we need to become activists of our own inner world so that we can be more in service in the world. And whether that service is to be a good partner or a husband or to be a good father, that's a service to the world. You're raising a more healthy, balanced child, that's a service. I don't just mean Mother Teresa or Gandhi. And so I lost my thread. Sorry, what were you...
talk about the ripple effect and how it can kind of exist at different levels.
Yeah, I lost my thread because I get so passionate about this subject. But
passion and anger are very closely related, so
you.
Be careful here.
Where's the punch bag? But so I call this work inner activism, and the not so secret mission is to support people to do their inner work so that they can, like I said, the ripple effect is then being kinder to the person you buy a newspaper of or the person who pushes in front of you in Tesco's, and then they're then less aggressive to, and on and on. So it's that kind of, those kind of ripples, and I really believe that those seem insignificant and they are massive. It's massive to think that you might be kinder to somebody in a newsagent who then is kinder to their child, who then is not so bullying in their behaviour at school, and you know that it really has an effect. And I also believe that the work that we do and lots of other people do in terms of this type of what I call inner activism is really how we change the world, is one person at a time behaving differently, caring differently, becoming kinder, more compassionate, giving a shit. I'm sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. It's because that's the other danger of living neck up, Tony, is you can because we have emotions and they're there for a reason. So if you're if one is operating in this neck up way, is we can become in protecting our hearts unconsciously, we can become quite selfish and also not give a shit about the environment or the person next to you, or it's just like, oh yeah, there's my tribe, 4 people in my life and my friends or something, my family and my friend, and everyone else can go screw themselves. And it's like, that's not that's certainly not a world that I want to live in.
So the ripple effect is once you start to, increasingly focus on yourself, do the work, then at a kind of probably at an unseen level as well as a seen level, it starts to make a difference.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's all those, like I say, those seemingly insignificant things. It's like a woman that I worked with once, and she said she used to, because she was so busy, because she was so successful, she always used to walk past the big issue seller and she wouldn't make eye contact. It's like, I've got to get my coffee, I'm too busy to talk to you. And then what happened was she did some work, and then she decided to stop and actually talk to this big issue seller, and bought him a coffee and a croissant or whatever, and she said, he said to her, it's not so much the money, it's the kindness that I need. And I just thought that was beautiful, and really touched me. And she said they both stood there crying, outside London Bridge Tube or something.
Yeah.
But it was really, it was the kindness that he needed, and that, and all of those small acts make a difference. And that's also, I know that from my own life, Tony, is that the people that that when I was in my kind of unprocessed pain place, so when I was angry and it was leaking out all over the place because I didn't redirect it to the original source, I hadn't made those connections, I hadn't done the work, and it was leaking out all over the place, is strangely enough, I used to attract into my life lots of other angry people. It's like attracts like, dysfunction attracts dysfunction. And I see this a lot, a male sort of old friend of mine, he used to say to me, every time I go out, Donna, I don't know why, but I get into a fight with someone, and it's like, hello, because he's so angry, and he's like this walking time bomb, and he goes out into London and he's on his push bike, and then he gets in a collision, and then he ends up fighting in the street with somebody, and it's like, it's all because there's this charge to him, and this is the energy.
Talk about energy, exactly.
People feel it. If somebody angry sits next to you on the tube, you'll feel that anger. You'll feel it. Yeah,
I got told something last night, which I want to tell you partly because it was quite flattering. But
nice.
I saw this. I met up with a friend of a friend who I haven't seen in 4 years, and she's Mexican. I don't know if Mexican people tend to be quite direct, but she was very direct. And he and her came around for dinner last night. And then they were getting ready to leave, and she said, Tony, you're 30% more attractive than when I last met you.
Brilliant.
Very
specific.
At first I thought she said 3%. I was like, what? But so you're 30% more attractive, and I was quite pleased about that. I was trying to think what it was. 30? But I think probably the only thing I could think of that's changed is that I've probably done the work a little bit since then, and been through quite a big process, and things like the journey of this podcast as much as anything else. But whatever it was kind of, she couldn't put a finger on it. It was some kind of energetic thing, and it's very nice of her to say.
Nice. That's lovely. 30% well earned. But, and it's also that thing of it's what people are drawn to is authenticity. Like moth to a flame is authentic people. And the more you become, it's again that saying the unsayable, and being able to relate to people not with this masked, I'm a nice guy, Tony, but actually just I'm a real guy, and being able to have those conversations. She probably feels, through all the work, the different bits and pieces you've been doing, you're just more open, and that is very attractive, 30% more.
Or 3%, depending on whether you hear it right.
Exactly.
With that, I think that is quite interesting, particularly for men as well. I think, there's men can be, inverted commas, nice guys, but actually when they're a bit more authentic, they might be a little bit less nice, but they're being more real. And I think that works for men. And certainly I interviewed Dr. Robert Glover. Have you heard of him? He wrote a book, No More Mr. Nice Guy.
No.
Oh, I love that book, and I love his work as well. And he came on, and he was brilliant, and that book's had a big impact on me. Right, okay, something I ask everyone on the podcast, what is one book you'd recommend and one tip for living with more energy, vitality and motivation? So what would the book be? So many books, but the book that really sprung to mind when you asked me this question is around a book called Falling Upwards by Richard Rohr. And Richard Rohr is a father, so it's Father Richard Rohr. It's got religious references because he's a father, but I'm not religious. But the message of this book was so profound for me, and it's really about the phases of life, ego phase versus spirit phase, whatever that means to you. And he really beautifully describes how the first half of life is meant to be about ego-based living, because that's how we kind of, that's how we get the job. And if we didn't have an ego, we wouldn't get qualifications, or we would, and it's really about outside in living, like things outside of us. We need that to build ourselves, so we build the ego, and then something happens, as he describes, much better than I am, but usually mid-life or earlier,
we really, everything, the ego kind of is kind of destroyed to some degree, and we have some kind of crisis. And then there's an opening for us to potentially live a different way, and that's what he calls the spirit phase of life, a bit like you're describing with your 30%, maybe a little bit, and it doesn't have to be woo-woo, it's just a bit more open, a bit more softness, a bit more real, that isn't so much about outside in living, but inside out living. You know what I mean by that? Yeah. And this book, I was blown away by this book, because he kind of written what I always believed, but he'd written it so eloquently, and it was amazing. And he's called it Falling Upwards, because he says, Tony, he says it with life crisis, he says it feels like falling, but you're actually flying. And I love that. So when we have these crises, when we fall into despair, it feels like a disaster, but it's actually something quite different.
Yeah, because I suppose what you mean is those, and certainly this was the case for me, those moments that seem like the worst moments, well, you have to learn from them, otherwise it's just going to get worse.
Exactly.
What about the tip then? One tip for living with more energy? For more energy,
well, it's no surprise to really dare to look inwards and to process your emotions. So really to actually do some inner work, and you can do that by yourself or with trusted others. But really, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, I don't seem somebody that would, that's around grief, because I'm full of joy. And like I said, the reason I'm full of joy is because I've done my work. And so if people want more energy, really dare to go into those kind of scary places inside, because what lies on the other side of processing that kind of loss or that pain is more energy, more joy, more motivation. You just feel lighter. It's like carrying all of that unprocessed pain, and the older you get, the more it's like more heavy burdens. I always think it's like an invisible rucksack of pain, and we're like this, and then when you dare to go there, you just feel lighter, and then you become more playful. It's like me, I was misery for 20 years, and now I'm like, I'm so full of joy because I've done that inner work. Sorry, it's a long answer.
No, it's a good answer, and I'll tell you something, just before we finish, one thing that sometimes occurs to me, and occurred to me then, is there's quite a frustration sometimes when you hear something you think, oh, I know loads of people who could really help themselves doing that, but you can't persuade anyone else to do it. You've got to make your own decision, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
can't book someone else on a retreat.
No, and it's really a disaster when that happens. We've had it where someone's wife has said they've done, say, the bridge, and they've booked their husband on and said, if you don't do it, I'll leave you. And so you can imagine, you get this really resentful man sitting there, arms crossed, going, what is this bullshit?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not helpful. It really isn't. And the best way we can send that out to people is by living our life, and showing who we are, and people get inspired by that. Like you're joking aside with the 30% person, it's like people are inspired by that. You're 30%, I would say, more yourself.
I think we should call this podcast 30% more attractive.
Yes. Brackets Tony.
Yeah.
I love it, yeah.
So where can people find out more about you and about the bridge and everything you're doing? Because I know you do taster sessions here in London as well, don't you?
We do, once a night, World Cup.
Oh, I won't be coming tonight, but maybe the next one.
Yeah, exactly. So we do taster, like an information evening. It's free to attend, you just come along, and I'm not really the hard sell kind of girl, so it's really just to hear about from me what the bridge is, and hear about also from people that have done the bridge recently and a long time ago, so you can really get a sense of the kind of long-term benefits. So all of that is the information is on our website, which is thebridgeretreat.com, and you can read about me on there if you feel so inclined. And also we are on the usual, Instagram, etc. I'm not great on those things, but I know we've got a Bridge Retreat Instagram account, and it's at the Bridge Retreat. Well, it really sounds amazing. It's been great to chat to you as well. Thank you. Thank you. And so good luck with the bridge as well. Thank you. Yeah. Really, thanks so much. I said to you
remarkably happy for someone who spends a lot of time with people who are processing grief, didn't I? And I spoke to Donna again after the interview, and she has offered £250 off the Bridge Retreat. 250 quid off the Bridge Retreat, and all you need to do, the 6-day retreat, all you need to do is mention Zestology when you book. Simple as that. So if you would like to investigate what Donna does a little bit more, then mention Zestology and you'll get 250 quid off. As always, that is it. Thank you very much for listening to Zestology. Next week I'll be back with Daniel Lieberman, who talks all about the master chemical in the brain for managing your mood and how to kind of regulate it and get it into a good place. Really cool. I really enjoyed that one, actually. Remember, if you go to iwanttounplug.com, then you can take Dr. Stephen Simpson and my course on unplugging from technology and accessing better states of creativity and focus and productivity as well. You can go to iwanttounplug.com, use the code Zestology for 30% off. And one more thing, I've set up a page on my website which is all my favourite hacks. So everything that I've been kind of using over the last few years, that people have mentioned in interviews, that I've tried out and I've carried on using. Because I try a lot of stuff out, but not everything I carry on using. But the stuff that I do like is all on one page on my website now. So if you're interested, you can go to tonywrighton.com/hacks and you can find it all in one place. That's it. Have a great and zesty week, and I'll see you next time.